The people who design financial fraud schemes are not random in their targeting. They are, in the most uncomfortable sense of the word, professional. They research their targets. They test their approaches. They refine their scripts based on what works and what does not. And they return consistently to the demographic that produces the highest rate of successful fraud per attempt. That demographic is people over 50. Not because people over 50 are less intelligent than younger people. The research does not support that conclusion at all. Not because they are less financially sophisticated. Many of the people who are most successfully defrauded are highly educated professionals who spent careers making sound financial decisions. The targeting is so consistent and the success rate against this demographic so measurably higher because of a specific combination of factors that converge in the 50s and 60s in a way that does not exist at any other life stage. Understanding those factors precisely, not vaguely, not with the comfortable distance of someone who does not believe they are at risk, is the single most effective defense against them. My name is William Grant, and I want to have this conversation without the softening that usually accompanies it, because the softening is part of why the problem persists. The conventional version of this conversation involves a list of obvious-sounding scams, a few cautionary examples featuring people who seem clearly different from the person listening, and a general instruction to be careful. That version of the conversation does not work, and the fraud statistics tell us it does not work, because the people who are defrauded are not people who had not heard of scams. They are people who were entirely confident that they would recognize a scam if they encountered one, and who then encountered a form of deception specifically engineered to bypass exactly that confidence. The first factor that makes people over 50 the most targeted demographic for financial fraud is the wealth concentration it represents. By their mid-50s, most people who have worked consistently for 30 years have accumulated the largest investable assets of their lives. Retirement accounts, home equity, savings accumulated through decades of discipline. This is the moment of peak wealth accumulation for the majority of working adults. Fraudsters do not target people because of their vulnerabilities in isolation. They target them because the combination of vulnerabilities and accessible capital makes the effort worthwhile. The person who can be persuaded to transfer $50,000 is worth more effort than the person who can be persuaded to transfer $500. The second factor is social isolation that is frequently not perceived as isolation by the person experiencing it. As people enter their 50s and 60s, social networks that were maintained primarily through professional contexts, the colleagues, the professional relationships, the daily social contact that full-time work provides, begin to thin. Children are independent and at a distance. Spouses or partners may work different schedules. The social density of middle life decreases, and with it decreases the informal protective effect of having multiple trusted people who would notice an unusual financial decision and say something. Fraudsters cultivate a relationship before they propose a transaction. The relationship, which often begins weeks or months before any financial request is made, fills a social void that the target may not have consciously recognized as a void. The third factor is the specific cognitive characteristic of deep familiarity. Decades of experience in a professional field, in navigating financial products, in dealing with institutions and advisors, creates an expertise that is genuinely valuable, and that creates a specific form of susceptibility. Experts are more susceptible to sophisticated deception in their domain of expertise than novices are, because experts use pattern recognition rather than step-by-step evaluation to make assessments. When a fraudulent presentation matches the surface patterns of a legitimate opportunity that an expert would recognize, the expert's pattern recognition fires before the skeptical evaluation that would otherwise catch the inconsistencies. The person who has evaluated dozens of real investment opportunities over 30 years is more likely to be deceived by a sophisticated investment fraud than someone who has never evaluated an investment, because the fraud is engineered to trigger the pattern recognition of someone with experience. I worked with someone named Beatrice. That name is blocked. Her name was Constance. 62 years old, a retired CPA with 40 years of experience reviewing financial documents professionally. Someone who had literally built her career on identifying financial irregularities. She was defrauded of a significant portion of her retirement savings through an investment fraud that presented itself in the exact form that her 30 years of experience had taught her to recognize as legitimate. The documents looked right. The credentials looked right. The performance history looked right. The presentation matched every pattern she had learned to associate with credibility. And precisely because those surface patterns triggered her professional recognition, the deeper analysis that would have caught the fraud was bypassed. Her sophistication was weaponized against her. The fraudster had done their research. What the most effective fraud prevention actually looks like, as opposed to the version that makes people feel informed without changing their behavior, is not a list of warning signs to memorize. It is a structural change in how certain types of financial decisions are made, specifically by introducing external verification steps that occur before any commitment is made, regardless of how legitimate the opportunity appears. The most reliable protection is not internal skepticism, which can be bypassed by sufficiently sophisticated presentation, but external process, a rule that any new financial opportunity above a defined threshold is discussed with a trusted second person before any action is taken, and that this rule applies without exception, regardless of how much confidence the opportunity presentation has generated. I have spent years in this work, and I reached a point where I could not keep having the fraud conversation without also addressing something that I believe is directly related to it. And that is the financial vulnerability that comes from having a single primary income source that offers no margin for error when fraud or any other financial disruption strikes. The people who are most devastated by financial fraud are those who had no financial floor beneath their primary assets, no additional income that continued independently, no second layer of financial structure that remained intact when the fraud removed the first. I put together everything I know about how people who are not wealthy or technically sophisticated have built that kind of additional financial layer, income that functions independently of a single source and that provides a cushion that changes the catastrophic into the survivable. I made that available in one place not because I want to sell something, but because the alternative, continuing to have conversations about fraud without addressing the financial resilience that determines how badly a fraud damages a life, felt incomplete. The link is in the pinned comment below this video. I want to be direct about timing. What I compiled reflects a specific configuration that I cannot guarantee will remain unchanged. The fraud conversation is urgent. The financial resilience conversation is equally urgent. The link is there right now, and I encourage you to look at it today rather than discover later that the configuration changed. The behavioral change that actually reduces fraud susceptibility is not more information, it is more friction. The fraudsters who target people over 50 are counting on the fact that the opportunity will feel urgent, that the window will feel limited, that waiting will feel costly. Every piece of pressure they apply is designed to move the target from consideration to commitment before the external verification step can occur. The only reliable counter to this is a personal rule that operates independently of the urgency. A rule that says, I do not commit to any new financial opportunity above a certain dollar amount without a specific waiting period and a specific conversation with a specific person, period, regardless of how the opportunity feels. Rules that apply regardless of feeling are the only rules that hold when the feeling is deliberately manufactured by someone who has studied exactly what feelings move you toward action. Let me share a few experiences that changed the way I think about who is actually at risk. Miriam, from Denver, Colorado, told me that she had been a bank branch manager for 26 years and that she had identified fraud for customers hundreds of times during her career. She was defrauded at 64 through a romantic relationship that took 8 months to develop before any financial request was made. And she told me that not one moment of those 8 months felt like fraud. It felt like a relationship. Philip, from Memphis, Tennessee, described losing a substantial portion of his retirement savings to a cryptocurrency scheme that was presented to him by someone he had known through church for 3 years, a relationship of genuine trust that was cultivated specifically to be used. And Barbara, from Phoenix, Arizona, who had a doctorate in economics and who described the investment fraud that cost her $200,000 as the most sophisticated financial presentation she had ever encountered, one that used her professional knowledge to make her more susceptible, not less. These are not people who ignored obvious warning signs. They are people who encountered deception that was specifically engineered for them. The protection is not being smarter. It is having a process that operates even when everything feels legitimate, and building a financial life in which no single loss, however large, takes everything. That second part, the financial structure that provides a floor, is what the link in the pinned comment is about. I am not going to tell you it makes fraud impossible or irrelevant. What I will tell you is that the people whose lives were most completely changed by fraud were those who had nothing else underneath. And building something underneath, while you still can, before a fraud or any other disruption makes it necessary, rather than prudent, is the most concrete action this conversation points toward. The link is pinned below. It reflects what I know works for people starting exactly where most people over 50 are starting. Look at it now.